John, I know you headed up a graduate school and you've been very active in higher education leadership. Does it seem as though higher education is losing its power when it comes to being the main source of learning? Is it becoming too elite? Is it becoming too expensive?
Yes, especially if you consider the world demand for knowledge. The first university was in Bologna in 1088, and so it isn't that old an institution. And following that was Paris and Oxford. And all of those were started by either church or state or a combination. So the owners of education have had pretty strong control since the very beginning. And they determined what was taught, who taught it, and on what timetable. So if you think about it, higher education, it isn't that old, and it's been rather well groomed, as it were, in terms of format, how it works. And of course, many of us enjoyed that over the years, very much. So it's been a good model for many of us, but it isn't a good model for the future.
And what percentage of the population is actually being educated with that model?
Less than 10% of the world's population can afford to be in that format. So it's kind of shocking, really.
So that structure is under a great threat?
It's under a great threat not because it's doing anything particularly wrong. It's doing what it's always done. It's under a great threat because new technology and new players are coming fast. And what they're doing is they're changing the game. They're saying to people who want to learn, and we have a lot of people who want to learn, come and be a part of learning, but we will meet your needs, your timing. We'll find professors that suit your needs, your pedagogy. And so it isn't saying that the universities are going to go away. High status universities are with us. We shouldn't be too concerned about that, because some of us will be able to send our kids to what is a structured learning process and enjoy the social and developmental aspects of that.
An example is Georgia Tech.
Yeah, it's kind of I think Georgia Tech has created a new device whereby they will keep what they have on campus. 2 master's degrees are going to go online. One of them is a master's in computer science, and the other is a master's in business.
These are their most popular courses.
Absolutely. What they've said is if you want to take those off campus, you can do it at 20% of the cost of on-campus tuition. Now, think about that a moment. That's going to be hugely popular. And it should be. People should be able to get that knowledge. Georgia Tech has given this a lot of thought, and they're providing true leadership.
We've heard of MOOCs, M-O-O-C-S. Tell us about those.
Yeah, MOOCs are massive, open, online courses. The word open means free. So if you have a device and you can go online, you can get a MOOC. These MOOCs have been developed around key faculty members who've got big popular support, and some of them, including one at Harvard, had as many as 200,000 students enrolled. These courses are very, very popular, and they're very popular with people who normally wouldn't be able to get to that course. My favorite is a story about a 17-year-old who recently enrolled in MIT as a freshman. And how did he get there? Well, MIT saw that he had passed a MOOC, their second year course on circuit design, with 100% score. So if universities are interested in using this for recruiting, MOOCs are ideal.
But the surprising thing is where he was from.
From Mongolia. A small village in Mongolia.
So this is happening all over the world. How did we get here? Could we have seen this world of online education coming?
I think so. I think we could have seen it rather easily if we looked One of the things I did at AT&T was to write a paper on the future. Mitchell Energy had sponsored a contest called With a 35. And my job was to write a paper on the future of communications in 35 years. What would it look like? And I got it pretty right. I was surprised. But I went into the Bell Labs and I looked at other labs and I looked at what they had. Transistor. We had satellite communications. We had compression technology. All of that was in the labs at that time. I figured that once that got developed and mass produced, that we could have a very substantial communication system around the world. And that everyone would, in 35 years, be able to communicate with everyone else. And we would be able to see what other people were doing around the world. And we would be able to teach each other. And that was the part that I was most excited about. And today, we have it. We can then see what we're up to, what other people are up to. So we can watch wars and spy, and of course we can teach each other. We can learn from each other. And of course that was the thing that had me most excited. How's that gone? It's gone very well.
And there have been learning pioneers.
I like to think of it as a mixed bag, a very mixed bag. Starting with a little for-profit in California called lynda.com, which teaches technology. And it's a very successful operation. The second one that I like very much is Minerva, which is very bold and exciting. It's a combination of for-profit and not-for-profit. It's global. It's education for the masses, if you will. It's both on campus and electronic. The next one I like is Wisdom Warehouse. It's a small warehouse here in California that has the wisdom of some of the great minds captured on tape. And you can go and mine those minds. And you can find out what they thought. And it's really quite exciting. Some of those minds are still around. There's a wonderful company called NovoEd that was a spin out from Stanford. The founder of that company is in the room. And that provides, again, good course material and a platform for learning. Khan Academy is quite well known because it teaches math and science in a way so that kids can get it, adults can get it. It's quite an exciting place. Udacity, it's the company that got Georgia Tech and AT&T together to sponsor this computer science course. Versal is it's a for-profit, but it's going to be open source tools for education and learning. It's a very exciting company. And Game Desk is a company that designs games that are educational for K through 12 with lots of good art.
The future of learning. So what's next?
The bits and pieces are here. It reminds me of the way the internet itself came together. There were different groups, different companies, different geniuses, if you will, struggling away, and then it all had to come together. We're doing that right now in the education space. I remember not too long ago moderating a seminar for global CEOs. These were people who had companies that were sprawled across the world, but didn't feel that they were truly global. And the reason is that the leaders themselves saw that their companies were not very diverse in their makeup. Their own experience wasn't that rich outside the U.S. And their companies were very close to being culturally insensitive.
So they felt their companies were rather parochial.
That's exactly right. And they were worried about it. And all of them said, look, well, you know what's bad for business? War, disease, ignorance. That was the big one. Ignorance was behind all the problems they had around the world. Disease, war, people not being able to read or write. You know, in a world where women and girls can't read or write, all of us are totally degraded. Half the women in Pakistan cannot read or write. In a world where young men and women are uneducated and also underemployed, you have a lot of anger and you've got potential for very, very bad things to happen. And that's where we are now.
And that leads to cults, to terrorists.
Cults, terrorists, all that is breeding under this thing called ignorance.
So ignorance. What tools are available to help eliminate that?
Well, the main thing that's here with all of us is handhelds. And handhelds are growing very fast, especially in places like Africa. Not only are handhelds growing fast, but apps that go with them for learning tools. And I think that the people who are gathered here can do a lot about this. So I'm going to issue some real challenges to this audience.
Let's do it. What's number one?
Let's eliminate global ignorance. It's there to be done. We need to do it. Let's get on with it.
What's number two?
Move action learning goals to the top of the agenda for every enterprise. So if you imagine for a moment that everybody in the organization is truly learning, you're going to be a much more effective organization. So build some tools and build some metrics and compare learning metrics to share price, or if you will, employee per share price. The third thing was to make sure that every human transaction in the organization, every one, is based on learning.
Explain that for us.
So if we are going to do hiring and firing, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? How do we learn that? How do we learn from every single transaction? What did we miss? What did we learn? We can do that. And we can use, as MIT did, we can use education, if you will, or knowledge as a way to get the best people.
What else?
And finally, take every employee and retiree and equip them to develop courses, mini courses, that'll be available to the people who need it most around the world.
So individually they do this?
Individually. Equip them to do it. Train them and equip them. We can do it. People know things, and other people want to know those things. It's a wonderful, wonderful transaction.
Well, that's a huge empowering idea.
I hope so. I hope people will really get on with that because it'll help.
Are there models of companies that are doing this successfully?
I'll give you three quick ones.
Okay.
Most people here already know those three. First one is Unimerco. It's a small tool company in Denmark that became a global technology company. And they did it by having everyone from the president to the machinist all learning. And then taking the knowledge that they gained and creating intellectual property. And then storing that intellectual property and using it for the benefit of their customers. A wonderful model. They grew very fast. And last time I saw they were quite rich. Sir James Black was a Nobel laureate, he's now deceased, who started a little lab in London and filled it with young people who he put into learning teaching teams. And they would attack problems by learning and teaching each other about what they knew about those problems. They, as a result, invented some of the most powerful drugs on the planet. One of them was Tagamet, and the other was beta blockers. Those have been hugely successful and saved millions of lives.
I assume it's really helpful if they get together people of different backgrounds.
That's exactly right. So every team was in charge of hiring the people they needed for the team who could fill out what they needed to know. Good way to hire. So the last one is Pixar. When Steve Jobs bought the graphic arts business from George Lucas, he knew he wanted to have a company that built the world's best animated films. And so he put together a team, and from the very beginning they were a learning teaching organization. When you went to work at Pixar, you signed a contract that was called a learning contract. You agreed to learn and you agreed to teach. My good friend Rob Cook, who was the chief technology officer, taught code, and he took sculpture. What did that result in? Well, it resulted in winning an Academy Award for the Toy Story 1, which turned out to be a profit center for the company. so that everything they did contributed to the future success of the business. When they sold to Disney, Steve Jobs was Disney's then second largest shareholder. So they did rather well. These examples are for every company here, or every individual here, to consider the power of learning and teaching. And each of you are good at it, so let's get started.
All right, the challenge is there. How do you make it happen?
You should stand up, you should look around the room, find someone who you do not know, but who looks like they would be wise and empathic. Go to them and say the following words: how can we learn from each other? Once you do that, you're going to have 14 minutes to solve some problems by working and learning together. I'm going to give you some samples of problems, but certainly you can create your own. Now let me start with one that's very simple. Could we work together to begin to solve global ignorance? Could we recruit other people to join us if we did that? And then, of course, the magical question: how do we get started? I leave it to you. The world is in need of all that you can do. So let's get to work, okay?
Yes, there's the challenge. Any final thoughts?
I'll go back to H.G. Wells, who said that humanity is in a foot race between survival and education. And I believe the people in this room are the ones who are going to help us win that foot race, starting today.